I'm going home now. We're going to pick up a bunch of plants that I've got at the house, offload the mower, get the wheelbarrow, run the lows, get some soil amendments, and then we are going to knock out a landscape install that has been on the list for 2 3 weeks now. We talked about it back in, I want to say, March or April with her about, you know, getting this kind of a privacy planting with a little bit of a color interest in there. And so we've got some knockout roses and hydrangeas. And that's going to be some just ridiculous summer color for her. But then we've also got a crop arborvitae trees that will eventually grow into a privacy barrier. So we'll see how that project goes. Basically, we're gonna do it the budget way. They did have an option to go in and do basically where I would either rent a machine or go in by hand if the machine wouldn't hold the slope, because it is on a slope. So they had the option for me to basically go in and till up the area, bring in some really high quality landscape mix, and basically sort through and till and get all the rocks out, bring in the high quality landscape mix, almost make a sort of a berm, if you will. Um, you know, bring in this landscape mix, pile it up, make a berm, pack it in, and then plant on that so that everything is like guaranteed. But then they also had the option to do what we're actually going to do, which is basically, you've seen me do it before if you're following the videos, dig the hole out big enough to backfill with soil amendments, and then pack it just in the ground as is, and just kind of work with the land as is, as opposed to regrading and fixing the slope, which typically I don't do anyway. A lot of that, I typically do it the way that you're going to see it today. But that's part of the reason is that stuff is expensive, you know. If we were going to do it with the machinery and the extra dirt and the tilling and the regrade and the berm basically to plant on, I mean, it would have been a $5,000 or $6,000 job, because just the equipment rental alone would have cost me probably $1,000, you know, to go through and till it, rent the machine to move the dirt, get something to either deliver the dirt or rent a dump trailer to move it around myself. There's just a lot that goes into that, especially when you don't own the equipment. You know, like I don't own an excavator, I don't own a skid steer and all that. So it would have just been a big old process. And doing it this way, it's a lot cheaper. The cost on my end is lower, and so you can pass that along to her. And it basically puts $5,000, $6,000 job down to like 32, I think is what I quoted her. And then to take that a step further, they opted for smaller trees, so that's going to bring it down to like 28 to 2,700 to do this. And it's really straightforward job, especially being in the summer. There's not going to be a ton of weeds growing back, so the actual prep of the area is going to be a lot easier. But anyhow, I'm just rambling because I'm in the car. I'm going to go get home, and I will see you on the job. All right, so here is this project on the hillside, making a slightly curved bed. Got knockout roses, we got hydrangeas, we have emerald green arborvitaes, and then today we're going to plant these, and then one day this weekend we're going to come and cut out the bed, and the bed's going to go around it all the way. And what we're going to do is we're going to follow that curve of the plants, come out here, and then terminate there. We're going to try to incorporate these trees. And then on the neighbor's side, we're also going to cut out
all the grass, and then I'm gonna have to figure out what to do on the back side. But it's 3 o'clock, sun goes down at 5:30. I gotta get to work. Why is there landscape fabric here? Oh, shoot me. All right, so yes, that is right. This video immediately follows up Lawnside Chats number 39. I finished up that hedge trimming landscape job and came out here to get these plants in the ground. And the thing about it is, the first thing I run into, landscape fabric, the worst possible thing. Alright, so thankfully that was all the landscape fabric I ran into somehow, some way. I don't understand it personally, but you know what? I'm counting my blessings. It was very lucky. And the rest of this soil actually dug up really, really well. And thanks to the smaller trees, I had quite a bit of an easier job than I expected going into this one. Alright, so the soil amendments you see me using here are the same as every other job. It's compost, soil conditioner, topsoil, something with perlite in it for extra drainage. In really, really bad conditions or really, really hard clays, I'll add some sand for a little bit of drainage help. Really just, it's typically the same mixture, but sometimes we'll deviate. The real goal, though, is just to give that plant the best chance possible to establish itself, to get that taproot going, and then it can typically work through the tough soil and figure out its way. This is just kind of a little bit of a boost to get a plant started. We've done this for many, many years at this point, this exact way, and sure enough, we really don't replace many plants. I think in the last 6-7 years or so, we've only replaced 2 or 3 plants, and I totally attribute it to this planting method and honestly picking the right plants for our area. There's been many, many years in the past where, you know, we'll try things, and things just die. And it took a little time to figure it out, but, you know, here's the deal. If I were a little bit smarter about things, I would have had to do the trial and error, you know. I could have just looked up information for our area a little bit more diligently. I could have drove around the city and just seen what plants look good, what landscapes look good, and just kind of copy and pasted that. But truth be told, doing a little bit of extra research, there are a few plants that are not common and are not really obvious to our area that, thanks to that research, we can make certain things work better than you would actually expect. Some plantings next year, you may see some of those plants, because again, I'm learning all the time. This planting you're seeing today is really just kind of a basic functional planting. We're going for the privacy barrier situation, and these trees are just sort of it. All right, trees are in, looking good. On to the roses. All right, and so we're planting these knockout roses in here for a couple reasons. First and foremost, on the customer's side, they wanted some nice color. So what easier way to get color reliably than a knockout rose? These things are extremely prolific even in the worst of soils. You'll notice I don't use quite as much soil amendment for these roses, and you could literally stick these things on a rock almost and they'll bloom. They're really hard to mess up, and they just bloom like crazy, especially when they do get established and they hit that growth spurt year. Oh my, they go insane. So that's another added benefit. This is a privacy planting. These knockout roses, you can see how far I'm spacing them out. If they're just left alone, meaning no maintenance, they will spread and feel. They will fill their entire space over time. And when they eventually do get that big and create a wall of roses and rose color, then we'll go back and start shaping and planting. But that'll take 4 or 5 years, which is really, it makes it a great option if you are looking for super low maintenance planting. Knockout roses, they're going to give you the color and low maintenance, and even a privacy barrier if that's what you need. And you can kind of see the scale of this one going downhill, and that was the point of including this shot here, is that it's a huge slope going downhill, and you can see why I wanted these smaller trees. It's going to take ages for these to become the privacy barrier, but I talk about that a lot more at the end of the video. Alright, so we're just mixing up that next round of soil amendments, and then we're going to plant these really interesting hydrangeas. They're a limelight variety, but they've got that little red tint to them. If you know anything about limelights, they're really great. They're super easy hydrangeas to plant, and they don't take over the world like an oak leaf hydrangea. They're extremely manageable. They'll get big and again help with that privacy aspect, but they're going to give you great color all summer long. Now if you know about limelights, again, they're a basic kind of a limeish, greenish, whitish bloom on those flowers, but you can notice on these guys, these have like a little reddish, pinkish tinge to them. They're called limelight firecracker or firecracker limelight. I don't know, I can't remember the exact name, but I saw them in the store. They look super healthy, and I got them. Here we go. All done. Just before the sun goes down. We'll get both sides here. I think it turned out pretty good. We got the neighbor side. And now what we'll do next here is go in with a weed eater and cut out the bed. It's probably windy, but we'll take a weed eater and we'll cut out the bed to go around it, and you can see the curve of the plants going that way. So the curve is going to come out and then wind up around here somewhere, but it's going to curve the opposite way. And I may even try to get her to add a couple more, like another rose bush here or something just to cap it off, but there we go.
All right, so that is all done for the day. Not all done, but I got all the plants in, and that's good because we're on crunch time for our planting window, and that was the last or second to last. I've got 2 more plants to plant. And we've got rain rolling in sometime later this week. My hands have dust on them, so I can't get my app to work. But we got rain rolling in on Friday with a 45% chance. I'm gonna have her go ahead and water anyway. I'm gonna have to get back out here and cut out the flower bed and put out the pine straw. So I don't know exactly when I'll be able to do that, but I'll get it done, right? It'd probably be Monday or Tuesday of next week if it's going to rain all weekend. I don't like to spread things out like that because, you know, the faster you get it done, the faster you get paid. But look, the shorter days, man, they're killing me. I hate the shorter days. I love working in this weather, but I hate the shorter days. But I've got that done. I've got a few more things to do at that other job. The one with the big holly shrub that I have to get on the orchard ladder for. And that's just sort of the way that I tend to do these bigger projects is I'll chunk it up into more realistic bits, right? Get it to a point where, you know, it's not half done, it's, you know, 3/4 of the way done, right? And then that's just sort of how I have to do it when the days are so darn short as a solo. I mean, it's a lot of work, you know? And that's something to think about when you get into this stuff. And I think it's important to acknowledge that, you know, when all these guys are telling you not to take these large jobs and to take on smaller properties, this is why. Because you get into this time of year where a full day, you know, it's just not enough unless you're going to get up at 6 a.m. when it's dark and it's 35 degrees outside, and go work until, you know, 5 o'clock when the sun goes down, because it is 5:25 right now. Okay, so that's a way to reclaim your day. But then you're getting out there at 6 a.m. or 6:30 a.m., however long it takes you to drive to the place, and firing up equipment. You know, I don't know how many customers are going to go for that. So it's a not even a double-edged sword. It's like a freaking, you know, like a freaking, what's that thing on the with a stick that's got the spikes on the end of it, or whatever that is. It's just a lot of edges, a lot of points, because you got the customer don't want you to be there at 6 or 7 because it's too early. You got the fact that it's also 35 or 40 degrees that early, which, you know, fine, you can work in that. That's okay. It'll warm up. You got the fact that the days are shorter. You've got the fact that the jobs themselves are actually longer in November because the leaves are there, right? The leaves from the trees. Another thing that no one ever talks about is the fact that if you're a fall planter like me, like I plant from basically the 3rd week of September all the way through November. I'll plant stuff for you because I think it's the best time. But as soon as November hits, as soon as the 12 strikes on November, all the box stores, the Walmarts, even the mom and pop shops, they start putting away all their plants in preparation for the holidays, right? For Christmas and Thanksgiving and all that kind of stuff. So in some years they have put it out, like they've put everything away by November 1st. And when I say that, I mean like the 3rd week of October, everything is gone. So it's like, crap, I missed my window to plant. I missed my window to get to get supplies and stuff, right? It's just something that never comes up on these YouTube videos. So you really have to figure out your area and when they do things, because it can shoot bite you in the butt, right? So anywho, sun's going down. I'm gonna stop and get a couple of drinks here and head on home, take a quick little nappy nap, one of those all-night naps, and we're gonna see what we can get done tomorrow.
All right, here the next day with some pine straw, and we're gonna take the weed eater, cut out a bed, sling some pine straw. Let's get to it. And so here we go, we're cutting out the landscape bed. Yes, cutting it out with a weed eater. And I want you to look at the scale of this cutout, right? To be done with a weed eater. I don't know what other people's opinions are on this, but for me personally, this is by far and away the easiest, cheapest way to do it. Easiest in terms of it's easier than hauling a sod cutter out here and going all the way uphill with a sod cutter and trying to finagle it around roots and rocks and all that kind of stuff. You know, we're just going to take off the first 3, 4, or 5 inches of this Bermuda turf, and you can see me here trying to find a shape that I like. And it looks rough right now, but hang out with me and just watch it come to life. Watch the vision, right? All right, and just to kind of recap what you've seen there, because hopefully you can see things taking shape at this point. Your very, very first rough pass up the hill, I do such a light hit with a string trimmer that you can't see it on camera, but I can see it in person, right? And then I do that little bit of a harder, like sharper cut, like edging basically, which you can still see those remnants here on camera. And now we're really going in at a tough angle, a sharp angle, and basically making the bed edge. Now there's pros and cons to doing it this way. Pro is what I said before. It's easiest, it's cheapest, it's quickest, in my opinion. We don't have to backfill a bunch of dirt, so there's no reshaping, there's no regrading from a sod cutter pulling out a bunch of dirt with it. There you can see, sharpening up those edges. And the con is this is grass that we're cutting out, and we're not cutting out the roots, so this is going to start growing back and coming back. So you have to really, once you do this, you have to really be on top of your weed prevention come springtime. And if you do this in the middle of springtime, just immediately spray it. We don't want to spray it now, because if it's brown like it is in this video, it's not going to do anything. The Roundup products, weed killer, grass killers, they typically only work on green foliage, right? Not everyone is that way, but for the most part, as a general rule, don't spray Roundup on brown. right, now here we go on this tough corner. I kind of mentioned that earlier in the video, and I kind of like the line that I had here in the end that you see. You'll see it in the finished overview when I get done putting the pine straw out. Should have went with a slightly different line, but what I'll do is I'll make that correction when I come back out in the spring to do their next round of pine straw. For context, the footage you're watching was on 11/6/25, November 6th, 2025. So we'll come back in the spring, give them another round of pine straw, spray out all the weeds that have popped up, and this thing's gonna be looking fantastic. Alright, now it's the moment you've all been waiting for, the pine straw install. Made this one real quick and easy. Went ahead and skipped the filming on cutting out all the grass. It's basically what you saw in the last little bit of clip, just on the rest of the bed, cutting down to the dirt with a weed eater in all the spots you can. Now, the thing about the pine straw, in my humblest of opinions, I definitely think it's way better than mulch at weed suppression, especially in a scenario like this where you are cutting out just the tops of a grass and not really getting down to the root. What it'll do is it'll kind of mat down with the rain and wind and time. It'll mat down and almost make like a wet blanket and smother out a majority of the stuff that's there. It does a really, really good job in a situation like this where you're not doing a sod cutter install and you're just cutting out a bed. Mulch does a pretty darn good job, but you'll still get quite a bit more weeds when spring really hits and the rain comes, and your mulch is going to wash around. The thing about pine straw that I love is that when you're on these hills, the stuff doesn't move, it locks in. Again, remember, wind, time, rain mats it down, and it turns into like a wet blanket, and it locks together and it blocks those weeds. It's just a really great mulching media for weed suppression, and it looks pretty darn good. And the other reason I love it, the color lasts so much longer, especially if you can get a pretty good batch of pine straw. Here lately we've been having some struggles with it, but I was pretty pleased with this batch that we got. But here this year, 2025, I've tried every single supplier for pine straw, and I guess the only thing I'm coming up to is I guess maybe I'm just too picky, because none of the pine straw that I've used locally looks anything like what we used to get back in 2017, 2018, and I don't know what's changed really. I literally have a video on my channel from 4, 5, 6 years ago that I bought a new bale of pine straw about a week after we had installed some pine straw for a customer, and the brand new bale of pine straw looked worse than the bales that I had installed many weeks prior. And I made a video comparing the two, because basically the reason I got that other bale was because I was like 2 or 3, maybe however many bales short, and there was this pine straw supplier was nearby, right? So I was like, you know what, I'll just go to them, even though I don't like their supply. And sure enough, it just reminded me, this is why I don't like their supply, right? Unfortunately, cut to 2025, and the supplier that I did like now has the same lesser quality pine straw the old guys had. Alright, so as a solution to this whole pine straw issue, I've been looking outside of our little towns here. Support local is fine and dandy, but support local has to be mutual. I'm just as local as they are, and keep that in mind if you're ever getting guilt tripped into buying local. because that's what they like to do. They guilt trip you because, oh, you're buying a kid's backpack and school supplies and shoes, and you're putting food on a local family's table. Well, here's the deal. They're taking all that stuff away from you by charging prices and a lesser quality product and service that, you're paying more and getting less, basically. So they're taking those things from you with some of their practices. So listen, don't support local just because it's local, right? Just because you're going to get judged. That's backwards. If you're doing a bad job and you're running a bad business, you're the one that should be judged. Okay? Just flat out, if your prices are too high, sorry, you're out. If you can't afford bulk, sorry, you shouldn't be offering the product, right? So yeah, we found a company outside of our town. We're going to start buying from bulk from them. Probably in February, I believe. We're going to get a big bulk order delivered to us. Something that nobody else locally offers is delivery and on bulk orders. So, like I say, already a huge increase in customer service. I couldn't be more excited for that. All right, everyone's favorite part of a pine straw install, the end. The blowing, the tucking of the pine straw. This is one of the funnest parts because you kind of make a big old mess and then you get these nice clean, separated edges. This is my favorite part of any landscape, right? The finishing touches, the little cherry on top kind of stuff. It's just the best. Alright, we are all done. Planted pine straw all the way down. Gotta water these hydrangeas, and then we are good to go. All right. So I'm a little perturbed, a little frustrated. Listen, man, that looks good pulling up on it. Listen, this is an example of why you don't do joint projects between neighbors or friends or anything like that, because here's the deal. I'd been working for the neighbors and the individual that wanted that landscape installed, and they both seem like totally great, kind people. Very friendly, very trustworthy and all that. And whenever we were out doing the landscape idea for the lady that wanted it up the hill, the neighbor down the hill came out and basically, after talking for a minute, just blatantly just volunteered to pay for the trees. And it was like, okay, cool. And that was back in like April or May or March or whenever it was. I can't remember. So I told him, we'll plant it in October, because that's when we plant, yada yada. And October rolls around and we start planning the landscape out. I sent them both neighbors a mock-up. They both approved the mock-up. In that mock-up, the trees were very large. And I told them, here's the deal.
you know, here's the layout. You know, if you think everything looks good, I'll go ahead and pick up the trees, and I'll pick up her plants, and we'll get it on schedule for whatever day, week, whatever, right? And he comes back with a response of, "Oh yeah, Home Depot has some arborvitaes for $15 or $20, whatever." And at that point, this is like 2 or 3 weeks ago. At this point, my heart sunk because I knew I'd messed up, right? Um, Even though back in April the original discussion was we're making a privacy barrier, we're going to use some nice, you know, good sized trees, and I said at that point, you know, trees are going to range, you know, a tree for a privacy barrier is going to range from $125 up, and then I've got to charge to dig the hole, plant the hole, add soil amendments if it's rocky clay. So, you know, it's 125 plus, you know, each tree. And like I say, he texts me then in October, "Hey, Home Depot has some for $20," and I'm like, oh, this is the reason. And I knew from that moment, like literally my heart sunk because I knew I had screwed up. And from that moment in my head, I fully, so this is, again, mind you, 2 or 3 weeks ago, I fully written off, you know what, I'm probably either my original customer who wanted the landscape is going to pay for the trees, or I'm just going to lose out on the trees, right? Because we were both, me and her, under the impression that he was going to pay for the trees. Because he came out and confidently said, "Oh yeah, we'll pick up the trees. Yeah, that'll make it, you know, we'll just split it, right?" It's like, okay, cool. Sent him the mock-up. It looked exactly like what I planted, okay, but with bigger trees. They both approved it. So cut to that discussion. I explained to him, you know, we're planting a privacy barrier. Like, those $20 trees are going to be like maybe a foot tall if we're lucky, and it's going to take it about 10 years to fill in and fulfill the purpose. Well, he decides not to respond, and didn't respond the entire time that I was out buying plants, finishing these other jobs. So the span of about 2.5 weeks, he basically ghosted the process. And so I went there fully prepared to let the original customer know, you know, I'm going to bill you, I'm just going to give you the invoice for everything. I've gone ahead and bought the smaller trees. They're not the $20 trees, they're about $25, $26, because thankfully they were the size you saw there. And you know, I just told her, like, here's the deal. I haven't heard from him at all. I don't even know if I don't think he knows even that I have the cheaper trees. So, you know, I don't even know if he's going to be paying for it. I'm just going to give you the invoice. There's a section for trees, and you guys can work it out if that works for you. Because here's the deal. I wasn't going to just put the cost of the trees on her when he volunteered it, and here we are with the trees, you know. So I was going to do that. I was going to let her pay for it, and it was going to be the cheaper trees. So, you know, took about $400, $500 off the bill. And if he wanted to pay for it later, he could, right? Well, he comes out while I'm telling her this. I'm in the middle of telling her this, and then she goes, "Oh, okay, well, I'm just going to let you guys kind of talk it out." Like, she goes away, and that's fine, because he's there. And I show him, he's looking at the layout. I didn't move a thing. After he looked at it, I said, "Yeah, so what do you think?" He's like, "Oh, yeah, that's going to look really good." And I was like, "Okay, yeah, well, you know, I'm going to go ahead and, you know, get everything planted." So he saw exactly where they were at, okay? He saw exactly where they were at. I told him a number, a price for the trees, $300 for what was there. Okay, I told him that in person, standing there. I showed it to him on the phone. I tallied it up, and I showed him on the little calculator app on the phone. $300, you know, give or take. And he's like, "Yeah, okay, that's great, cool." You know, because in the original plan we were talking about $800 or $900 for really nice, big, beautiful trees. And he ghosted. But when I showed him that number, he's like, "Oh yeah, cool, that's great." And I told him this morning, here's your cost for pine straw. So your total cost for the day is $500. And basically what I'm doing is I'm doing cost on your initial pine straw for a couple reasons, but that's beside the point. I just told him we're doing cost on the pine straw just to kind of help out and make things smoother. And then here's your price on the trees that we just talked about. And mind you, he was out there, he saw where they were planted. And he waits. So I'm out there basically from the time he approved it, standing there, saw the number, saw the plant layout before I dug the holes. I spent the entire 6-hour process digging the holes, planting the plants, digging out or cutting out the grass with the weed eater, planted like 60% of the straw. I have like an hour left. And then he comes out and he says, "Am I responsible for all these trees?" And I said, "That's what you said you were going to do." And he's like, "Well, yeah, but I thought there were going to be more on our side." And I said, "Well, you know, we were standing out here and you were looking at it, where they were going to go." And when we initially talked about it in April, we talked about a curved landscape that, you know, would look nice visually. And, you know, like we had this discussion. We had the property line, like, you know, talked out. And basically it comes down to he didn't want to pay for all the trees because they're not on his line, even though he came out and he kind of inserted himself into the project discussion because it was fully going to be on her side and she was fully happy to pay for the full big size trees. And then he gets involved and it turns out he doesn't want to pay for anything. So now, not only does he not want to pay me, she doesn't have a full proper privacy barrier because he was going to offer to pay for the trees. And by the way, it was a good price for 6 like really big giant arborvitae trees, you know. So basically he comes out and he's talking to me and you know, he didn't want to pay the $500 price that I quoted him, but he waited until like an hour worth of work left to come out and mention anything. And you know, I just told him, I was like, "Dude, just forget it, just pay the $200 for the pine straw." And you know, I just told it, like I had already written off the trees in my head, like, you know. And he was like, "Well, you know, you can just I'll just pay you $200 for the trees." Or no, he says, "Well, I'll just pay you, can we just do $300 total?" So he's wanting to pay $100 for the trees. And he says you could take it up with her on the rest of it. And I said, "Well, she's already paid her portion in full, in cash." And you know, I just, like I say, I've already written off the cost of the trees. Just pay the $200 and I'll get out of here and finish the pine straw. And you know, that'll be that. Because, and I just told him straight up, I said, "It's my fault. I shouldn't have done a joint landscape. I know better." And I said, "But it felt like a different situation. I thought you guys were, you know, friendly with each other and you were very confident about paying for these trees, and it, like I say, it felt different than most situations, but you know, again, that's totally my fault. I'll just eat the cost of the trees." And I meant it too, like, because here's the deal, I don't want to do anything for them anymore. Like, I just don't. It frustrates me. And by the end of it, he offered to pay $400 out of the $500, you know. And that's just even more insulting because it's like, dude, you see me out here for like 6 hours busting my tail trying to get this thing in, and you offered, like, you came over and volunteered to do that, like, and now you're upset because you don't want to. And now I'm in between two people, and I'm literally, it doesn't have to be a complicated install, but it is now. And like, thankfully it's done, and hopefully they're not going to have like arguments or anything about property line and who owns the trees and all that kind of stuff. But like, dude, why did he like, listen, man, I just, this is one of those things I need to just flat out be like, I'm only going to work with one person. And I have this rule with places like warehouses and HOAs. I want one point of contact, period. You know, you guys work it out, figure out what you want, ask me if I can do it. I'll say yes or no. I want one point of contact. You know, HOAs, I'm not going to answer to your residents. I want to answer to the president or the vice president, one or the other, not both. You know, I've treated similar situations like this in the past. Like, here's the deal. I'm going to bill Mrs. Smith, and then you guys can parse out, you know, how you want to pay it. That's totally up to you guys. I don't want to be involved in that. Like I've done that before. And why did I not do it this time? Because I know better. You know what I mean? There's been so many of these situations, and I know better. You know, I don't know why. Again, I do know why, because they felt really amicable and friendly, and they still kind of are. Like, nobody is like openly pissed off or anything, but I'm sure there's a little bit of like, oh God, like, oh, did that really happen? Like, oh, it's just so frustrating to me, that now that lady doesn't get her goal of a privacy barrier because they didn't want to pay for trees. And then the fact that I went that extra step to try and find a middle ground, and I did get smaller trees, cheaper trees, and he still doesn't want to pay. Like that just ticks me off, because it screws me over and it screws her over. You know, the only person that comes out on that is him, not paying full price, you know. And the fact that I told him, like, we're doing cost on the pine straw, just to kind of, you know, because it's not a there's a few reasons I did that. The reason I did that is it's not a quote unquote full install. I'm not ripping out the entire grass. You know, stuff's going to grow through. We're going to spray it. It's going to be a process. So I just charge cost to get that started. And then the pine straw that we got in stock now at our supplier is not great. So I'm not going to charge full price for it, just because, again, it just feels like the right thing to do, you know. And again, he comes out and he doesn't want to pay full price, you know, even though I told him the price yesterday. Like, that frustrates me. And in the moment, just to try and stay calm, I told him just to forget the trees. I've already written it off in my head because I figured you wouldn't want to do something with it. So I've already taken that loss in my head mentally. So I'm not even, you know, and I meant it, right? And then he comes back and wants to pay $400 instead of $300 total. And it's like, dude, you're already getting a ridiculously stupid deal. Like, it's just insulting, you know. And again, it is 100% my fault for entertaining it. You know, and here's the other thing too, with them. I was supposed to do 3 hedge trimmings this year and have them on schedule, pre-scheduled, like I do everyone. But here's the deal. They were a newer customer, and I forgot. I just totally forgot, because they're in an area that I don't typically service. And it wasn't until October they reached out for me to do their hedges, and I said, oh, crap. And so I went in October, and I didn't do a summer trim because I forgot to pre-schedule them like I do everyone else. And I felt I felt like crap, because that's unacceptable. That's bad service. I don't want to do bad service. So I said to him on that fall hedge trim, I was like, hey, look, here's the deal. I did bad. I did a bad job. I was supposed to have you pre-scheduled, and I just didn't. And, you know, I told him, because it was a Sunday when I did it, and I told him, here's, like, the reason I'm here on a Sunday, because I don't work on Sundays, is because I did a bad job at scheduling and having you in line. And again, because I didn't have you on schedule like I told you I would, because I didn't do what I said I was going to do, I'm going to do this fall hedge trimming for you guys for free. And now at that time, you know, mind you, this is a $240 job. You know, he wanted to pay something, and I was just like, you know, just, I mean, $100. It's, if you feel like that, but I really don't, like, you know, if that's just to, you know, so something, you know, I don't know. It's just, but really, you don't have to pay me for these hedges, because I feel bad. Like, and that, again, felt to me like the right thing to do. And so after I do that, after I do the pine straw thing, after I go ahead and get the smaller, cheaper trees, he says, "Nah, I don't want to pay for it." Like, man, that's frustrating. And again, I told him, like, I was gonna plant some azaleas because now the area looks, they said, bare because of the pine straw on the hillside. It's like, well, maybe it needs something to fill it out. And I was like, yeah, let me know. And I'm just thinking about, like, thinking through all that stuff after we had our discussion. Like, I don't even want to do that, you know, if I'm not going to get paid for it. And I'm just going to, like, I'm 50-50. I'm either going to charge a buttload or I'm going to just not do it and say, sorry, you're on your own. Like I say, that, and even though it's $100, like, it's the principle of it, you know, and it's the accumulation of, you know, I'm really trying to provide a good service and be honest. And, like, again, the pine, I'm not charging you full rate on the pine straw because of the quality of the pine straw, which is nothing that I control. You know, like, it just feels like the appropriate thing to do is to not charge full rate because the quality, the end result is not going to be as good, you know. And yeah, I just yeah, it burns me, man, and I'm frustrated, and I think I'm gonna have to just sit and think about it. I don't want to lose the business, but there's gonna have to be like a serious, like, here's the deal, my prices with the prices discussion, you know. And another thing is when I do a landscape, I always warranty my plants. If they die before the following October, I'll replace them for free, no questions asked. I'm not doing that with those trees. You know, they burst into flames, and you know, I don't care. I'm not touching those trees without getting paid for them on replacements. You know, that just that irks me, man. And like I say, I don't want to lose the business, but there's going to have to be a serious, like, the prices are what they are discussion. And I'm not arguing over prices, you know, and that's kind of what got me shortchanged with the 400, is the fact that I told him, like, just forget about it. I've already written it off. Like, I don't even care. Just let's move on from it. And then he offered the 400 because he saw that I was annoyed. And I'm not gonna like I say, I'm not gonna argue. I'm not gonna demand you give me money if you don't want to. I just piss on it. Like, I just won't be back, you know. Or in the future, I'm gonna make sure you pay up front. You know, I'll get a credit card, put it on file or something. I don't care. However, we need to work it out. But it's just completely unacceptable, you know. And the argument of, oh, dude, it's just $100. Yeah, it is just $100. So why didn't you pay it, right? Like, you know, the argument goes both ways. You know, yes, it is just $100. So please give it to me, you know, because that's, you were told that. You can't even say that my communication was off, because we had multiple discussions standing there. The plants were physically in the spot they were going to go. I did what I could do. You know what I mean? I don't feel like I really misstepped, except for breaking my rule of not doing a joint landscape project and not having having multiple points of contact when I should have just had the one. Hey, look, learn from my lessons, everybody. One point of contact, one invoice. If you want to contribute, give it to them. I don't care, as long as I get my full payment, right?